Three things that the government does more efficiently than the private sector. I want to continue on this riff that I started with in the first hour about the efforts of the libertarians to tear down our government, to destroy our government here in the United States. And Alex Henderson wrote a great piece that's over at Alternet. It's titled, "Here are three things the government does more efficiently than the private sector." The first is Medicare. Medicare operates far more efficiently than any health insurance company in the United States. And in fact, I just retweeted a tweet that Bernie Sanders put out that was a Canadian doctor's testimony before Congress in which she's puncturing all these false narratives that are floating up on the right, that Canadian doctors are leaving the public system. They're not. That Canadians are coming to the United States for health care. They're not. That, actually more doctors are moving from America into Canada. More people go from the United States into Canada than the other way around. It's pretty remarkable how she just nails it. She lays this stuff out. So Medicare actually works, which is one of the reasons why the Republicans want to destroy it, because Medicare was brought to you by Lyndon Johnson, a Democrat, and a Democratic Congress, although there were some Republicans who voted for Medicare. That ain't happening anymore, because the Republicans are firmly under control of the libertarian billionaires, the people that Joe Scarborough calls classic liberals. No, they're libertarians. In the United States, they wouldn't be considered liberals. Maybe in the UK, but not in the United States. Another thing is the U.S. Postal Service. The U.S. Postal Service does things better than private companies. I mean, if you think that that the U.S. Postal Service, this is from the article, he says it so well, Alex Henderson. He says, ironically, if Republicans succeed in privatizing the Postal Service, it will be small towns and rural areas, the Republican base, that would suffer the most, not the urban Democrats. Presently, one can send a 1-ounce letter anywhere in the United States for 50 cents, an especially good deal if you live in remote Montana, South Dakota, or Idaho. But there's no way the rural towns and small towns would continue to enjoy mail service at such a price under the GOP privatization scheme. And that's true. It's just, we're spreading the costs all across the United States to make this service available to everybody, just like we do with Medicare, just like we do with Social Security. And the third one that he points out is high-speed rail travel. By semi-privatizing Amtrak, and not really giving it the government support it needs. And it has to use privatized rails. We privatized all the rails up and down the East Coast. And so Amtrak can't even, most of the rail can't even sustain 70 miles an hour. So Amtrak has to go slow in that Northeast corridor. And it's not because the trains can't go faster. The trains can go over 100 miles an hour. It's particularly the Acela. It can go 150 miles an hour. It's not the trains, it's the track. And the track was privatized. And it's owned by a hodgepodge of companies that charge Amtrak to travel over it and won't, create new track. Where, and the same thing in the UK, when Margaret Thatcher came along and she said, oh, we need to privatize everything because, this whole idea of society is a myth. There's no such thing as society. There's only a collection of individuals. That's virtually a verbatim quote, by the way, from Margaret Thatcher. This is the libertarian, core idea that government shouldn't be doing anything. So she privatized the rails in Great Britain. And what happened? The price went up, the service went down. It was totally predictable, right? I mean, somebody's got to make a buck. How do they get that buck? They raise the cost of the tickets and they cut the cost of maintenance. Or hire people who are less well qualified to run the trains, which is exactly what happened. Meanwhile, the editorial board of the New York Times is editorializing, this was a couple of weeks ago, July 19th, about the National Guideline Clearinghouse. The National Guideline Clearinghouse is something that you and I pay for with our tax dollars. And it is used by doctors. If a doctor wants to, an actual physician wants to know, quote, can this emergency room patient tolerate a procedure that normally requires an empty stomach? Does that patient need a stent? Which antibiotic should this patient be started on? Right? These are life and death things. And doctors need to be able to get this information fast. On Monday, the Department of Health and Human Services took this offline. Why? Well, according to the editorial board, it's part of the Trump administration's plan to eliminate science from government's agenda. I would say this is something that could be done by private industry. You're going to see companies popping up all over the country, or maybe one big company is going to make their services available all over the country, and they're going to be saying to doctors and hospitals, we've got the new database. Now that the federal government has taken the database down, that was paid for with tax dollars, We've got one, and you can access it if you subscribe for only $500 a year. And it's going to be a new profit center. This is the idea of these libertarians, that government cannot and should not do anything. And thus, everything gets more expensive, and the quality of everything goes down. And the social safety net is torn apart, which is exactly what they want, what I've been talking about all day. You get where they're going with this? You get how, I mean, this is just so insidious.